And I remember reading one of your writings about this very thing, about what's important is the asking of the why, not the other, and that is so important.
Well, and I guess what you could use 2012 or anything else. I mean, you could use a day of I'm thinking here about a particular instance where I went in and I'd had this long-term headache, and they sent me for a neuroscan, and the doctor, almost in passing, said to me, "We don't know if it's a tumor." And I was just, oh my God, I have a brain tumor, So, no, I didn't. But the gift of moments like that, which I suppose could be true for 2012, is that if you think in some sense your world is going to end, how do you want to spend that time? What matters to you and what doesn't? Do you really want to get upset about somebody cutting you off in traffic? So in that sense, again, from the tradition I was trained in, we would call that making death the ally. The plus side is that if you look at your life and you say, well, what's the point of doing that, whatever that is, because the world's going to end in 2012, you might want to reconsider whether you ever should be doing that, because you don't know if you're going to get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. We both said yes at the same time. That was funny.
I mean, the world is ending for somebody all of the time.
Yeah, every moment of every day.
That's right.
Wow.
And I'm referring here to, of course, literally death, but also for many families. I think when somebody loses a child, it's the end of their world in a certain sense.
Yeah, well, it was kind of like what we just went through 2 months ago when Lynn's dad passed. It was interesting because as we were going through that, I kind of mentioned to Lynn, well, it's kind of interesting that your dad is passing and then her niece just had a baby.
Yeah.
And it's like the ebb and flow of life. There's something goes missing here, but something's created over there.
On the weekend that my grandfather died, I found out I was pregnant with my first son.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's, of course, the beauty of being in community and being in family where you know people from generations other than your own. Yeah.
This one came to me while reading through lots of your work late last night. Where does faith rest in the dream world?
Faith.
Is it important?
I honestly don't know how people get through life without it. I think sometimes hope is a double-edged sword. Hope is the kind of thing that can put all your eggs in a future basket. On the other hand, quite frankly, in difficult times, if you don't have some hope that things are going to get better, I'm not sure you're going to be getting out of bed. But I think underneath hope is really faith, is a kind of hope tends to be specific. When I've spent years with a chronic illness, and when I'm very, very ill with that, I have hope that it will get better. And that helps me at times cope with what's in the present moment, is that I have hope that it's going to get better. But hope is usually fairly specific like that, a hope of something in particular. Whereas faith is a different kind of thing. Faith is the sort of certainty, I may hope that I'm going to feel better, and I have a certain faith that whether or not my health improves, that something supports me and is with me and is what I'm made of, that will mean that joy is still a possibility, even if, say, my health doesn't improve.
There is a old friend, and he died, years ago, like 15 years ago or so, of Lou Gehrig's disease. Mm-hmm. And it kind of came suddenly, and then within like just a couple of years, he slowly deteriorated.
Yeah.
But he said one thing, and I've always kept this. I've never heard it anywhere else except from him. I never really read anything that even says this. Maybe you have, but I haven't. But he said to me, there's only two ways to be in life. You're either in joy or you're not. And he said it's very easy to tell the difference, because when you are in joy, you know you're in joy. Mm. And so when you stop at any moment and ask yourself, are you in joy? Then you know, if you're honest with yourself, whether you're actually in joy or not. I've been thinking about that, I don't know why, lately a lot. And kind of changing my thought on that a little bit, in the sense of, I kind of relate it to like peak experiences. That it is something I said earlier, that nothing is too clear for me anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just too clear cut.
It does have a bit of an implication of that you I mean, he's not saying this, but it has an implication that you can always just choose to be in joy.
Yeah.
And that could be dangerously close to denial if things around you or in you at the time are in real pain. So I tend to see joy more as grace. You know, I can't make it happen. I can make myself available to it, and that's where I have a lot of choice.
Yeah.
I have a lot of choice about, even in difficult times, how I'm going to care for myself. And actually, there are days, perhaps, when people are in so much despair when that's not even a real choice. They don't have that choice. And to say that they do, you know, is again, a kind of denial of the despair of the moment. The wonderful thing about joy is that it does come at times unexpectedly. You know, in the midst of something very, very difficult, there can be real joy about something small. The other thing is it does imply there's joy and there's not joy. It reminds me recently, I read an interview with an elderly woman, I think she was in her early 90s, and somebody said to her, "How is your health?" And she said, "It's good enough." You know, if you're 90 years old, you can't expect that you're not going to have a few aches and pains, if not something more seriously. But what she was trying to say is, I think it's good enough for me to still be available to joy.
Yeah.
And she finds that. She finds joy in a number of different places. So what she's learned is that, you know, things don't have to be perfect for me to be available to joy.
Yeah, we're on a line here, and maybe I'm too far off on a tangent, but I'm going to, because I very rarely speak about this with people, but I think that we can speak on this. I don't know, maybe it's a pet peeve, or maybe it's just trying to get an understanding of how other people react or don't react, or even, you know, looking at a mirror. But I take those peak experiences and those moments of when you have those sacred space type moments, when you're, you know, talking with a part of the divine within you, or like when you're talking to one of the grandmothers, or things that you can't really, you know. But why do you think it is that it just sometimes seems that people just can't be honest with that sort of stuff? You know, like if you see, or if you have that experience, okay, that's an experience, you know, just as an example, that you have an experience like that, let's say, just 4 times a month. Mm-hmm. But then people go on and start creating almost a delusion of that, and suddenly they're having those experiences 4 times a day. Mm-hmm. But they're not really. They're creating this delusion out of a truth. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, years ago, I remember reading a New York Times poll where they asked people if they had ever had what they would consider a religious experience. And I can't remember what the percentage was, but it was fairly high. It was 50% at least or more. But the second question is what was most interesting. Is they asked people if they had a choice, would they want to have another one, another peak experience? And well over 60% said no.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons why people start to pretend to themselves and others that they're simply living, the one I love always, people say, I just live in unconditional love.
Yeah.
And I always want to say, oh, I really want to come to your house and see that when your 3-year-old is throwing a tantrum, you know. Your inner or outer 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think one of the reasons why people do that is it's a way of gaining control, or the illusion of control, of course, over something that they don't have control. So why would over 60% of people who've had this experience be saying, that's okay, but I don't want to have it again?
I don't understand that.
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's an awareness that it's not in their control, and that's scary. I think it's also an awareness that if that kind of experience tends to rock our world, you know, our story of who we are and what kind of control we have and what's required of us, what's important, what's not. And depending on how big a stake we have in all of that, let's take something simple, yeah. Like, you know, I'm in meditation and I have an absolute experience of a connection with everyone, and I feel a real sense of unconditional love. I can't imagine in that moment how I couldn't love everything and everyone.
Okay.
And it has a profound effect on me. And the next day, it's my memory of it is strong, but I'm not actually having the same experience. because the difficulty in reality is, as a human being, can I really unconditionally love my own shadow, your shadow? So there becomes a kind of, see, some of pretending to be in it, I think, is a way of warding it off. I think it's the same as these people saying, yeah, I've had an experience like that, all well and good, I don't want to have it again.
And I want to be in control when it does happen,
Absolutely.
even if I have to pretend it.
So I'm going to call what I'm having right now that. I'm going to co-opt that for what I'm having right now, so I can say that I can make it happen, first of all. I think one of the terrors is it will never come again.
Yeah.
So I can reassure myself I can make it happen, and I can reassure myself it's not going to happen without my okay and my defining it in certain ways.
Wow. That's bang on. That's hard to wrap a mind around, though.
Yeah. Well, we live pretty scared most of the time, and we also live in a lot of denial about how frightened we are. So every little inch away from what's true in the moment is basically a coping strategy to deal with anxiety.